Tesla is breaking out on its chart, and wow, is there a lot of exposure still at higher prices and still at the 500 strike. If you guys remember, they were adding these like a month ago for the November and December expirations, and there's $162 million worth of call exposure at this 500 strike. So very interesting to see that, as well as this huge call, almost 300 million at the 457.50 strike for all expirations up here on the Gamma feature on Cheddar Flow. And if we go over to the chart, I just want you to look at this absolute beauty. This is a nice cup and handle pattern. As you can see here, the cup, and then we have that handle, and right on my pivot, the 439.97 pivot, we found support last Thursday, gap up. And honestly, guys, this has squeeze potential. Not only are we above my pivot that I've been referencing now for multiple weeks in a row on Tesla, but we also had a beautiful breakout, as you can see from over here in the previous week, retest, and then a gap up following the retest. And on the retest, actually, we closed on the pivot and then gapped up. It came back down, and the gap did not fill. That's a sign of strength, by the way. I call this a gap bait pop. You guys know this. You've been subscribed to the channel long enough. So we had a gap up over here, pushed higher, came down into the gap, but did not fill, because a fill would be over here at about 440. And then it came down into about halfway and picked up by the close with a very nice close, also above a local downtrend over here. So personally, my target on this one is 475 and then 500 eventually, ideally before end of year. And this is looking really nice. I'd say risk now is under 439.97 on the hourly close. Otherwise, looks beautiful for some more upside, and also closed very strong despite the S&P 500 closing relatively weak, at least on the day, as you can see over here, although we did have some positive, or it could be positive news out of China from this weekend. So we'll have to see how that influences the future session later tonight, as well as going into Monday, price action for the week ahead. Now, another thing I do want to mention, if I go back to the flow, is dark pool prints from last week. And because we are extended quite a bit on the S&P 500, well at all-time highs with a couple gaps below us, big gap ups that we had, I'm going to start to pay attention to dark pools a lot more, specifically over 3 billion in premium. And as you can see over here from last week, we did have a day that was about, this is roughly 6 billion in total premium over here, between this about 3 or so cent differential. So these we want to start marking on our charts, because this is potential distribution as we continue to push higher, which would be sell pressure from institutions via the dark pools. Now, we have to wait for confirmation for price to go below these levels. And as of the close on Friday, it did indeed fall below this 686.84 roughly level. So bulls want to reclaim this if they want to continue up with the momentum. Otherwise, this looks like some distribution. Doesn't mean that price has to fall and like crash straight off of this, but it's definitely a key data point that tells us maybe this rally is starting to abate a bit, at least from the amount of sell pressure that we're starting to see. And this happens over time. It's not just one print like this, guys, where you see it and then you expect it to fall off. You got to see multiple of these. So something to definitely keep note of. That was the most meaningful by far from last week. You can see over here, 1.3 billion in premium at the 685, and not that big, all things considered. As I scroll down, really not that much else, 1.1 billion over here. So this 686.84 level going to be key for bulls to reclaim in the future here going into this week, and then they can continue on their merry way higher. Otherwise, this will act as a very key resistance, especially intraday. So definitely mark it on your chart. Now, going over to some of the flow from last week, specifically for Friday, I actually found it very interesting that Amazon received quite a bit of bullish flow despite being up 11% in the day coming off of earnings. So as we can see over here, a 275 strike, a call for the 1/16/26 expiration, which is only 2 months away, believe it or not, 2026. This year flew by fast. This came in 9 minutes before the close, so 1.3 million in premium. This is a very unusual print, highlighted here in gold on Cheddar Flow. As I scroll down, there's a couple other gold ones here, as you can see, especially earlier on in the session. 240 strike here. This expires this upcoming week, actually. And then another one of those 1/16/26, also out the money for the 250, 1.5 million in premium. So quite a bit of premium still going into calls on this name, which is crazy to think about. You can see over here some of these in the money ones as well for 2026. If you go to the chart, you can see here there's a very nice cup and handle as well. Kind of similar to Tesla, but more robust, a lot more time on this one. You can see the cup here here and a very lengthy candle, which also acts as a bull flag. So you have a little bit of the flagpole here, and then the flag breakout, roughly speaking, would look something like this. So very nice earnings breakout, and therefore I'm actually very interested around the 239-240 level for a bid. The reason for that is because that'd be a very nice retest of the previous high, the local high from over here. All of this, if I just use this tool over here, all of this will act as a key demand zone now because it was a previous supply zone. So specifically this range over here, roughly 235 to 239, will act as a key demand zone. So if we do retest it going into this week, that'd be a very nice bid spot that I'd look for longs upwards of 250 plus. And you can see if I go back to the flow that there's already clear interest in adding those calls 2 months out for the most part, as of the mini dip that we received intraday, at least on Amazon on Friday. So this is pretty crazy to see this amount of call flow despite it being up so high. So they're very clearly interested in a lot more upside, just continuation to momentum, which we've seen before. And other tickers, think of something like Oracle in the past and NVDA in the past after earnings, where it just continues to push higher. Could be the possibility here for Amazon. So continue to watch this flow going into this week, and you guys can watch it as well. If you use the code SAVE15, you get 15% off after your 7-day free trial. So go to cheddarflow.com and you could add that promo code there. If you don't like it within the first 7 days, you can cancel. Otherwise, you'll get 15% off. Regardless, going into another thing, flow overview, because this has been pretty hot lately. We can see from all of last week that the overwhelming majority of flow was still in NVIDIA yet again, $1.3 billion worth of premium, guys. This is ridiculous, like actually insane that it's receiving this amount of premium, and it's not even an earnings week, which you typically see the most premium then. So incredible, 3,725 orders, and this one was a beautiful breakout. You guys know, I've been watching the channel, if I go to the chart here, that I was talking about this setup for multiple weeks. We finally got a perfect retest of this previous range. Nice range here, inverse head and shoulder, left shoulder, head, and right shoulder, breakout of that range, and then we came down to retest the range. Successful retest, and a very nice pump to 200 plus, which was the target on it. So went as high as 212 actually last week, which is very nice, a nice icing on the cake, so to speak. But as of now, we did see a lot of bullish flow from last week. Gonna want to see something like a retest probably. Either it continues to melt up from here, and I'll just draw it out for you really quick, continues to melt up kind of as it is right now, or comes down to retest something like 195 again, get a nice wick under 200, and then maybe continue from there. This is the level it has to hold, like between 195 to 200 has to hold for the uptrend to remain solvent, we'll say, or at least remain intact. Otherwise, if it falls down below there, you're looking at a potential for a head and shoulder pattern below this level, where the right shoulder would form around 195. So really need to make sure this area holds or just continues to melt up. Otherwise, under that, and you're looking for like a breakdown back to 182 back, and then head and shoulder breakdown. So that's something to be concerned of if this breaks. Otherwise, above 195 is beautiful for continuation. Already did very nicely on this one. So wanted to bring that to your attention, as well as one final thing, which is gamma exposure on the S&P 500. So I'll go to Cheddar Flow again. And as you can see here, there's a significant amount of exposure at this 682 level, which is also the spot price of where we closed on Friday. Now, most of this was actually at the 680 level. So there was some changes going into power hour and the close, potential hedging that we saw. So a lot more exposure at this level, which is why it switched. But this 680 level is very critical, and I assume it will continue to gain exposure going into this week. Had quite a bit and actually acted as a nice support intraday, which you could see from this post on the Cheddar Flow account from last week. So this is going to be critical that bulls are able to hold it. Otherwise, there's a lot more downside to around 670 on here. So very key that bulls are able to hold this 680 level as a support going into this week. Otherwise, some more downside, but if they are able to hold it and that news was received positively, at least the Chinese tariff news, then we can see some more upside from there. And there's a lot of clearing up here, starting to have a call wall form actually at this 700 strike, which would be crazy. We were able to see that before end of year, but this is almost 1 billion in total exposure right now that's been slowly climbing, kind of like that Tesla 500 wall has been slowly climbing with time. And this is for all expirations, by the way. So as long as they can hold this 680 level, you're going to see this continue to climb in terms of exposure, and that could potentially act as a magnet thereafter. But that is all from me today. As always, appreciate you guys watching this video. I'll see you next time.